So coming up next, we have My-Lan Thuong here, and she's based in France, I think. Yeah, and she's now working for SharpType. And today, she's talking about for the underrepresented Latin language. Let's welcome.
Okay. Hi. So today I'm here to talk about an exciting script that's not so well known, Latin. Indeed, I actually recently rediscovered there was a lot to learn and to do on that front too. So I'm not here to talk about styles, even though in my design practice I love to challenge the shapes, but I would like to focus on the signs themselves and their primary use, which is to transcribe a language. And even if it seems very basic, many of the hundreds of Latin-based languages still can't be written correctly. Because letters or diacritics are missing, and it is simply hardly acceptable when it represents the languages of millions of people. So, as an illustration of this problem, I selected these few samples of text that you'll be sad to know are from the United Nations website and document transcribing the Universal Declarations of Human Rights. So, for an institution advocating for equality for all of us, this design issue takes a very strong political meaning, and I was quite shocked to see that inequalities of treatment were directly transcribed into the typeface itself. I think it says a lot and directly speaks to us, designers, about our choices for graphic design and for type design and our responsibility in it. So what does the choice of characters included in a font really mean? What can we do to allow a better representation of all the Latin-based languages? This has been the goal of the research project I've led with SharpType for a year. So today, I'd like to share with you my journey, the questions and the difficulties I've encountered during my research, and I'll also introduce our answer to this challenge. So where did this realization come from? It took many steps, but the general context was the emergence and multiplication of multi-script families. Many foundries are diversifying their offer of scripts, and at SharpType we also have worked in that direction for our latest release, SharpType Grotesque, Sharp Grotesque Global, and that it comes in 5 scripts over a wide range of weights and widths. And that will be the case also for our next release, Sharpers. That will be available in 7 scripts very soon. That was a first time for Japanese, which is a big achievement led by Calvin Kwok, but it was also the first time for Devanagari and Arabic. At our small scale, this has been a big undertaking that was only possible thanks to a long collaborative process with many designers around the world. So what was my part in it? As I told you, Latin is my area of expertise, or so I thought. I was asked to add to the font to make it complete, and this very simple question emerged. Which character should we design? And defining the scope of a character set is always a challenge, and I guess even more so when working on RoboFont, when there are no preset glyph sets. Our first intuition was to add a very extensive backend with functional and font characters, but I felt that it would not be enough because this family spirit was an opening to more scripts, to more extensive language support in general. So I wanted to make sure it was the case for Latin too. The process of getting interested in extended Latin characters actually spread across many years and several steps, and it may seem obvious, but for me, understanding that people actually needed these characters to write their own language gave them a new importance and consideration. and it helped me get over my first annoyance and laziness at doing more work in that direction. So the first addition to emerge some years back was Vietnamese. I've been part of the Mali Scholarship, founded by SharpType since its creation 5 years ago, and it has also been an extremely enriching experience and an eye-opening window on the world. And from the first edition, I remember the designer Huy Minh Cao asking for more representation of Vietnamese, especially for display fonts. And this has echoed strongly with my own wish to design Vietnamese, to at least be able to write it, as I can't speak it, even if it's my family's language. So one day I decided to indeed add the Vietnamese to the font I was drawing, at the time, Carta Nueva. And this was a challenge, and I had to look at many references, but it's still something that's very achievable. So it made this stage when you add diacritics, which is not the most fun task, fun, and a new design challenge too. And ever since 2020, we've been adding Vietnamese supports to all our releases, and it's part of a new standard character set. Each designer we've been releasing the typefaces from has to do this exercise, and now we can offer Vietnamese in a lot of different styles. This has been the first step beyond our European languages support. And the next step happened while I was working on Sharp Earth, as I mentioned. I was trying to answer this question of what useful character we could add, and it took me on a bigger research than I imagined. I love doing research, but I'm also not a researcher, so it took me on many different leads and turns. The first thing I did was browsing through the Unicode charts to find this answer, and I thought they contained all the possible characters, which is only almost true. So you might know of the extended Latin A and B, but there's also C and D and E and additional, and it's hard to know what it concretely means and how it was sorted, definitely not by languages or regions. So it's not the most useful when you want to build a smart character set. But it still allowed me to discover many characters I'd never seen, and it was the first lead that called for more research. I realized that sadly, but not surprisingly, they were used in regions of the world that are generally discarded, such as the African continent, and I decided to make it my focus. When I mentioned this to my team, everyone was very encouraging, and I was very lucky to get some time to work more on this research. So I must say, I'm not an expert in African languages. I didn't and still can't read or speak any of them, but I think it shouldn't prevent me from getting interested in them, at least typographically. So I come in front of you very humbly, not to be prescriptive and all-knowing, but just offering an invitation to open our scope and perspectives. It was a very intimidating project, but I still decided to tip a toe, and I'm glad I did because I learned a lot during this process. So I admit I had no idea there were so many different languages in Africa, like about 2,000. And there are many families, subfamilies, local variations, and dialects. And to add another layer of difficulty, each language can have many different names. The Latin alphabet, is used to transcribe about half of the languages on the African continent, and the others would use Arabic or their own specific scripts. I invite you to look at this talk from Jamra and Patel, because they offered a very complete multi-script family for African scripts. On my part, I wanted to focus only on the Latin and go a bit beyond the standard African character sets. So I tried to search language by language. Sorry, can I play this? Yeah. And it was fascinating, and it I tried to understand which characters was necessary to write each language, but I admit I also got a bit overwhelmed after checking about 300 of them. And I also searched country by country because some of them have official alphabets that gathers many languages already, but it's only the case for a few countries, like Cameroon, Benin, or Gabon, but not for all of them. So the main difficulty at all the stages was that the resources were very limited. African languages have been studied, but mostly by linguists. And linguists study languages on many different levels, but they don't study the writing system in a type design perspective. So I could find detailed reports about the grammar or the descriptions of how the sounds were made, but much less systematically how it was written, if it was even written, and with which signs. So I had to use different sources that I'm not entirely sure of. Of course, I started with Wikipedia and wanted to trust it's coming from the individual source, but whenever I could, I would also cross the data with other sources. I found a few official documents, but mostly I would use Omniglot and ScriptSource websites that are incredible libraries with lots of data. And only after a while did I find the most useful platform that was built by type designer for type designer, which is ATypI. It changed everything in my research, and I can't thank them enough. Coming from an initiative by Rosetta Type Foundry, and it was fed by many collaborators, always improved, regularly reviewed, so it's a very serious research that I already compiled all the languages each script can write and with which character. So this allowed me to check what I had already found. So the scope changed again because we could go one by one, adding language by language, region by region, or just aim to cover them all. And this is the hyperglot list, and it might not be exhaustive, but it already covers about 500 languages for Latin. So yeah, this project is bigger than my own research though. It involved many other people. So this presentation would not be complete without mentioning the contribution of Chris Hernandez to add support for the indigenous North American languages. Chris is a New York-based type designer, and in the last years, he has compiled very thorough research on this topic, and we're very lucky that he shared the results with us. The additional characters that he advised to add, along with the combining mark system, made possible to write about 96 native languages. If you're interested in this topic, I invite you to watch Chris and Connor Davenport's talk. Connor is our formal technical director who made it technically possible and who implemented the combining mark system. So crossing the results from hyperglot, Chris's research, and mine, I compiled a new character set that we now named omnilatin because it aims to write all the Latin-based languages. From the standard 26 uppercase, lowercase, the alphabets become these very complex sets of characters. These are all the characters that we want to be able to use. It's a reminder that the Latin writing system is also quite rich if we want to dig and see it. And it might look a bit intimidating, but it turns out it's not that complicated to design. So the basic Latin alphabet and its 26 letters are limited to transcribe sounds for so many languages. So to add diversity for the possible transcribed sounds, many different methods can be used. The simplest one is to resort to diphthongs or digrams, which is the association of two sounds, but with two letters. So it's the easiest one. If you want to write Z, you just type D and Z. So it allows the standard keyboard and most typefaces. But some digrams can become ligatures too if they are encoded as one character. There are also the possibility to add additional signs or characters, that are sometimes made from existing letters that are from the Latin alphabet, the Greek alphabet, the international phonetic alphabets. Those letters can be turned, reversed, mirrored, rescaled, but they can also be exactly identical, and they will still need their own Unicode though. There are also the modifier, which has our ordinal letters. And we can also add additional signs on the letters in the form of different kinds of bars and strokes, or hooks and tails and horns. And there are also some signs that need their own design. It is true, it took some time to draw all of these characters the first time because I was not familiar with that design. But it was also a fun challenge, and it could lead to interesting shapes. And it's also very much based on existing letters, so it's quite accessible. The most common way to add new sounds, though, is to use diacritics above or below the letters. They can be simple, multiple, and make combination almost endless. There are different types of accented letters, so it's encoded already in the font that have their own Unicode, and the one that will be built from the combining mark system. So this system, for these letters, you have to type the letter and the diacritic to get the accented one, and the diacritics can pile up or get below the letter almost infinitely. So this system has been chosen by the Unicode consortium to allow more new accented characters to be added more simply, but it also creates kind of a difference in status between the characters that have their own box and are more visible and easy to implement and check for type designers, and the others using the combining mark system that are invisible until you add some feature and test the font. But anyway, after adding all these characters, we're now finally able to write more languages than we used to. And as type designers, our focus is most of the time on the design of the characters themselves, but we should not forget to check how they look in context. So we should check this at the scale of the word or name, but also and mostly in paragraph settings, because each language would have its own texture and needs. Some have a very surprising word structure, like those languages with so many repeated letters. Some will use a lot of different diacritics and have a very busy rhythm. Some will all have their own texture. Some will be loopy, some will have a lot of descenders, some won't. And it can be very uneven or very spectacular, so that we barely recognize the Latin anymore. So this raises a question: is how do we show a Latin typeface when it looks so different from language to language? And this is only something you realize as you use a typeface. And for that, the first thing is, of course, to use samples of text, but they were very difficult to find for most languages. So this is a call. If you have some knowledge that you're willing to share on some underrepresented languages, I'd love to see more examples of their use. Because as I do, and even as I prepared this talk, I keep finding ways to improve the design, the kerning, or even new characters I need to add. So I can never overstate the importance of proofing and testing your font in new settings. That being said, I wish I could say the opposite, but this was quite a lot of work for design and technical implementation. But this should not stop us from trying to make it more usual and accessible. And to do so, we imagined our new best ally. I'm proud to introduce to you the onmilatin tool. This is a RoboFont plugin that will be that will be open source soon. And it's here to help you build up your font to the onmilatin character set. Together with my coworker and friend Lena Le Pommelet, who is a talented type designer who graduated from École Estienne and Type Media and recently joined our team at SharpType, we've allowed ourselves to dream of the most helpful tool And to this end, we also collaborated with the type designer and Python expert Marte Verhagen, who, after graduating from Type in Media in 2022, is now working with Frederick Bellin, maintaining RoboFont with him. So these two ladies have been the perfect partners to build that tool that was first designed for our internal purpose, but that we'll share with everyone hopefully soon. It might look like a very plain interface, but it's quite, it's your best ally for the different steps of font productions. This was designed with easy UI, and in the most simplest way possible, you just have to click buttons and they'll do complex actions for you. This relies on library and dictionaries that we compiled from the researchers. So, of course, the first thing is to design the base characters, and a reminder is that we only add our extended Latin as one of the last steps of the font production, because your design must not change at that stage. What you need is basically the standard alphabet in uppercase, lowercase, diacritics, and some punctuation. And the tool will build the first sets of characters that need special attentions, like the letters with hooks, bars, and everything like that. Sorry. So to help you designing them, okay, to help you designing them, we have implemented a pre-build function. So it's gathering glyphs that would have a similar construction or in the existing font, so that serve as the basis for the design. This part is, of course, the longest part, as you need to design many letters. But once it's done, you can move on to the diacritics. There's quite a lot of them, because there's the standard ones, the uppercase ones, and the combining marks. But those, fortunately, are mostly made from components. And of course, after that, you also need to add anchors everywhere. But the tool will help you place them automatically. And we've included this nice preview so that you can visualize and check the placements of the diacritics on the letters. When all of this is ready, you can get to the most satisfying part, which is adding all the accented characters. And you only have to click one button to do that. Most of them will be perfectly well this way, but of course, like at every stages of the design process, you need to always check things. And to help you to do so, we have also added this Space Center component preview that helps you check placement. And there's also a hidden tool like that to fix Unicodes and a few other functions that you'll discover another time. So last stages are to actually generate the font, but for that to work, you would need some technical steps that are to add the mark-to-mark system in the features. So we have imagined these buttons to do that for you, have the mark-to-mark features and the localized features included already in the feature panel font of your font. So when you generate the font after that, you should be able to write in all the language and type the combining marks. This is still an ongoing process, but it's almost done, so we'll let you know when it's ready and available on GitHub and Mechanics for you to try. So in conclusion, this has been an incredibly enriching journey. Design-wise, of course, it was the occasion to rediscover the Latin alphabet, but mostly humanly. It was very fulfilling to approach type design with a wider purpose, to have it carry intentions and value. I love type design for its playfulness, But there, it can also become meaningful and more than that, useful. The representation of more languages is essential to so many people that it can't just be forgotten. I think it has to come from us, the type designers, who provide the font. Of course, this is not perfect. This is not a prescription and not something I invented, but this is our attempt at Sharp Type at opening to the rest of the world. And even if it was a big challenge for me to come and show you this project, I still felt that it was an important topic to bring to you in an international type conference. Because this kind of project is the kind of project that requires to collaborate and share our knowledge. So we will provide this open source tool, but I hope it will also invite more people to share their expertise and aim toward that goal. So I was happy to see that others, like Google, are also trying to support African languages more, because yeah, so far it's only possible with a few fonts. And I also know they're working with African designers, so it'll be very interesting to see their take on the design. Of course, this doesn't mean that all the typefaces should have this very extended character set, because it might not be the fitting scope for each project, but I still believe that it should be your choice. Thank you a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Mila. Yeah, it's a very interesting program because as native Chinese, we also struggle with the transcription in Latin with the pinyin accents. So it will be very helpful. And personally, I have a question. And I know it's under development. Can your tool helping for the kerning?
For now, it doesn't have any kerning functions, but maybe this is something we should add.
Yeah, because if you add the accent, maybe the kerning pairing.
Yeah, for sure. It also has some work for the kerning, especially with the hooks, like going over all the letters. Mm.
Okay. So, any questions? Yeah, we have a gentleman back.
Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was brilliant. I've often teetered on the edge of that rabbit hole where I'm like looking around at what I'd have to make to support certain languages, and it can be terrifying. So thank you for going and doing all that hard work for all of us, because it's absolutely insane what you've done. I guess, yeah, you just mentioned kerning then. To me, that's like one of the biggest concerns with adding this amount of detail into a typeface. It's like, yeah, okay, it was, even with like a normal Latin set, I still wonder, like, am I kerning things that just will never ever appear? So I'm really curious about how you're gonna try and approach that in the future, even if you might not know now. And also, I'm just wondering specifically with things like Vietnamese, where you have accents that are built out of multiple accents that probably exist already in your typeface, whether they require a kind of nuanced, like squishing or stretching or like adjusting to account for their proportions on the typeface. So like, for example, is a circumflex hook one diacritic that gets added, or is that two diacritics that get added?
Okay, thank you for your questions. The first one about kerning, yeah, that was the hidden load of work that I also had not seen coming, but turns out many characters have the same behavior in a way, like they would either be very high, like have a lot of accents, so maybe you can make them into groups, or they will have hooks or hooks below or on tops. So yeah, it's more work, but they also can be grouped. So it's not like for each character you need to go over kerning. But yeah, that was also a new lesson that I learned, that even if you think this pair doesn't exist, it might exist in another language. So you can't just, say whatever for this pair, and you have to be careful with all of them. That's also, everything about this project is about going into details and taking into consideration specific needs. So it's true, it's adding efforts and attention to it. For the second part of the question about the Vietnamese, I think we'll have more talk about that, but for now, it's true that they are encoded as, well, we have one diacritic that's made of 2 stacked diacritics in the font, because the accented characters have their own Unicode, so we can work on them and we can adapt the design to also take less room. It's unfortunately not the case so far for the combining marks. When they are automatically placed, they need to be built from the standard design, so they can't be squished. But for the Vietnamese, because we have this visibility, we can adjust the design for the stack accent. So sorry?
It can be both, like
depending
on whether you're using mark to mark or whether you are using Unicode values to like make a pre-composed character. You kind of need to set the anchors up for both situations. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I said. It's like we could do it when it's encoded, like it's because we can change these characters. But so far we haven't found a way to have it happen for the combining mark system.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Yes, there's many complicated things for modified one, combined one. Yeah. So, we have Jason.
I guess I hope I didn't miss this in what you were saying earlier, but I think it sort of relates to your question with different languages that you might want to support. Does the tool have a way of like sort of tagging the things that would be relevant for given languages that you want to support versus being sort of universally everything all the time?
No, the goal is to be universal all the time. So that would be a good, I don't think this is going to be the scope of our tool, but this is where the ATypI library would be relevant to check, because they have these data sorted by languages.
Yes, I think maybe a lot of questions should be concerned about the characters that shares. Some languages shares a lot of the same characters. Maybe that is, which character I made can, make more languages supported, something like that, maybe. So, but your tool is checked by language and language. Am I understanding right?
You think we can't check language by language if it's where you are.
Okay.
That's also the question, I think, and this is, again, where you use ATypI a lot, so that you can check language by language. But we wanted to have something that's actually global and includes everything, so that we don't select which language actually.
That would be the whole collection. Yeah.
That's the aim, the goal.
Okay. So, okay. Actually, we have just have time for the last question.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions. I'll make it quick. So first part, maybe I missed something. The techniques that you showed us, firstly, it was great. Is it a mix of both manual and automatic efforts that you have done, or is it all manual? The combination of different glyphs, ASCII characters, right? Is it do you require some manual efforts there, like by the font designers as well, to create those for different kind of scripts?
Do you mind speaking a bit slowly?
It's all manual,
Sorry.
right? And also, is this app that you just showed, is it for script fonts as well? Okay,
I'm
let
very
me
sorry.
rephrase my question. Okay, so what I said is, firstly, does this app support script fonts as well?
Script font? Like this kind of design?
Yes.
Does the tool can help with that?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't see any. Well,
Okay. Okay.
it's always another challenge
Another challenge.
when you design a script font because you got a lot of alternates and yeah.
Sure. Okay.
We'll test it more in this context,
Okay, it's fine.
but for sure.
And
Sure.
the first question that I've asked was, let me try to be more clear on this. Like the app that you just showed, right? I believe it was all manually that every designer has to combine those glyphs, right? Or would there be any kind of tech in the future that you are forcing that can combine those together automatically? Hope I am making sense.
I'm sorry.
But I think maybe if I understand correctly, everything you showed us the automatic
Yeah.
process, but I think you can still have the manual modify.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's helping you to automate whatever can be automated, but there is still some design to do, and there's, of course, you need to check everything, because it will automatically, for instance, place things in the center of a glyph, but it's not necessarily the optical center of a glyph. So, yeah, it's just helping you do everything that can be automated, but it doesn't do it all for you, for sure, unfortunately.
So the designer has the final decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just happens that you made reference to Google having done a bunch of stuff in this area recently, and I just happened to be the intermediate person that Google commissioned to go off and commission a bunch of fonts with African language support. And I just wanted to comment one useful little stat that might help people who are wondering, how much work is this kind of thing? If you were starting from a point of view of, okay, a font that does pan-European Latin support might be around 330, 350 glyphs. One that does also all African Latin languages, it's going to come out right around 800, give or take like 3, depending on how you count. So about 800 glyphs as opposed to 330 or 350. So it more than doubles the glyph count. It's not trivial. Now, a lot of that is composed accents, but there's also a lot that aren't. Anyway, thank you so much. That was fascinating and lovely, and it's great that we are getting so many more resources in this area.